guys, welcome to this week's episode of My Ethos podcast, and I'm here with my buddy Vince Sierra. I'm Josh Vietti. We're going to continue a discussion that we had last week about creativity. It was going really, really well. What's funny is I feel like we start at a starting point. We have an idea of where we want to go, but we don't really plan this out. That's kind of the idea of a podcast, is you just have a conversation. So I feel like last episode was good. If you haven't listened to the last one, you need to go back and listen to that one. But we didn't quite get to the specifics that I wanted to get to in that episode, so we kind of have a part two of this episode. So last one was the nuts and bolts of creativity. This episode is the creative process. We're going to get specific and talk about the actual creative process. We both do a lot of creative work. We work together. We work individually. We work on different types of projects. I put together talks that I do on a pretty regular basis, and I put together certain content for the web. And Vince is a photography, I would say, like master, very good.
Oh, thanks, man.
No, really, I think you're really good. I wouldn't just say that. I wouldn't.
You have to say it on the podcast.
I don't have to. I mean, I really think Vince is a good photographer. I really do. I think Vince is like a weird dude. He's like a guy who is able to put his mind to something and become really good at it, and then he gets bored and then he moves on. I think a lot of people like it bothers them when Vince is like doing something else because he's constantly moving and shaking. But I think both of us have kind of this mentality of you got to try new things. You have to do new things all the time because it kind of keeps you sharp. It keeps you focused. It keeps you in the game, so to speak, right? And so in this episode, I'm going to interview Vince a little bit, start there. He's going to talk about his creative. He doesn't even know really what we're talking about, but he's going to talk about his creative process in photography and in videography, which he's definitely got a huge talent with also. It's funny because Vince and I both started in our creative venture with video production.
Yeah, for sure.
We shot little skate videos and did little projects here and there. And from video, Vince went into photography, and now he's kind of made the full circle, and he's back to producing like cinematic quality videos and films. And you can see some of that work at OpenIrisMedia.com, which is our company, if you want to check it out. Also, Vince is on YouTube at Sierra Creative Co., so check that out. And if you haven't subscribed to My Ethos podcast, subscribe. Be sure to do that and share it, please. Please do. That's our plug. We don't have any sponsors, so we're just plugging ourselves at this point. That's what we're doing.
Sponsored by myself.
Sponsored by ourselves. We're doing this for the love. That's why we're doing this. We're doing it because we care about you, because we want to give you something that you can take and apply to your daily life. Now, I know that not everybody that's listening to this is a photographer or a filmmaker, or maybe you wouldn't even say that your profession or your life is creatively oriented, but I think in 2018, I think that it's really important for everyone to have the skill of creativity and be able to apply that to their lives. So I found this a new tool on Google. You probably don't even know about this tool.
I like new tools. All right, I'm in for it.
Teach you something.
All right, cool.
About the digital world. All right, so I was on Google, and I stumbled upon this tool. Everybody might know. I might be just like smoking here, but
behind the times a little bit.
Behind the times, it's very possible. So there's this thing called the Ngram viewer. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't. I want to lie. I want to lie and say I have, but I haven't. Yeah.
So if you go to books.google.com/ngrams, that's NGRAMS, you can. There's this tool. I feel like I'm doing an ad right now. I'm not doing an ad at all.
We're not paid by Google.
We're not paid by Google. But there's this really cool tool that you can type in words. It's a word search tool, but Google goes back and searches all these books from like the 1800s all the way to like the 2000s, and it graphs the word usage of that time.
Wow.
It's like a graph. So I went in there earlier and I did this. I'm going to do it right here, but I'm going to type in the word creative. Okay. The word creative. And then I'm going to type in the word, what's a good word? We were talking about this earlier. Kind of the opposite, not the opposite of creativity, but what is the word for doing as you're told to do without really thinking about it? Like, what's the word for that?
Obedience? Is that what we were talking about?
Obedience, yeah. Okay, that's the word. Okay,
right,
so
threw me off for a second.
Obedience. So I'm going to type in creative and obedience. I'm going to search these two, and it gives me it gives me like a graph of the words. Now, what's interesting is if you can see it, maybe you can go on Google and do this yourself. But if you see it, Vince, it shows. See, yeah,
it's kind of blowing out. Yeah, they're not going to see it. Sorry.
Anyway, and if you're on iTunes, you're like, I can't see it anyway. But if you look at it, the word obedience has like a sharp downturn, right? And the word creative has an upward turn. And,
interesting, yeah,
when I did it earlier, it was like creative is even higher. So like in the last 100 years, the word obedience has taken like
no one cares about obedience anymore.
Downward turn, and the word creative has taken an upward turn. And I thought it was interesting because I think when you think of those two terms, like you know, and you think of it from a cultural standpoint, like 100 years ago, it was probably very highly regarded to listen to your elders, to obey, to do, you know, what you're told to do. And now culture has kind of become more rebellious and like, don't listen to what people say, do your own thing, right? And there's ups and downs to both things. I just think I'm not trying to make like a point on you know, what you believe, but I was thinking about the word creative when I used to start talking about creativity to certain people, certain like cultures, kind of more conservative type cultures. I would get a little bit of a backlash, like it was a bad thing, and I didn't understand it. I really it threw me off a little bit, and especially like in church culture, like I was using the word creative. And saying it's important to be more creative, important to use this tool, this gift of creativity, and people would just look at me like they're like I'm crazy, right?
Right.
And it wasn't until I thought about like the first 5 words of the Bible that it really like kind of cleared things up for me that like creativity is a good thing. It's the first 5 words of the Bible. In the beginning, God created, and it's about how God created everything, and I believe that. Not everybody does. I get that, but I think that like from a religious standpoint or from a belief standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, that creativity is kind of a key to living life. Like it's a key to understanding life. I think the happiest people in the world, okay, the happiest are people that are constantly building and creating something new and thinking outside the lines, thinking outside the boxes, and thinking about how they can move the culture around them forward. And so when I'm thinking about all this, I'm just thinking that there's like a difference in mindset for creative people and people that just feel like they need to follow the rules, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel you. Like you're saying like people that are creative basically aren't so much, they're not people that are obedient, but they're kind of going against the grain or going against the rules.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that's a bad thing all the time. That's my point, I guess. I mean, yeah, certain times, yes, there are certain times where you need to do what you're told to do, right? We have to obey the laws. We have to do what our bosses tell us. We have to, follow certain rules of society. But beyond that, like, you don't have to follow a certain life path according to what other people think. And I don't know. I grew up in a world where I felt the pressure to do that, where I felt like I had to grow up and live my life according to what other people thought, and that robbed me of a lot of joy in my life. It robbed me of a lot of a lot of energy that I could have had when I was applying to myself to doing something new and fresh. And I feel like if you decide to be a creative individual, decide to work creatively, decide to be one of the builders in this world rather than one of the people that lives in the building, right?
Okay.
Like if you decide to be one of the builders, then your life will be a little bit more challenging, but I think it's going to be a lot more rewarding. I think your life is going to be a lot more full and rich. And so anyway, that's just my little spiel,
that's good. Yeah.
I don't know. That just kind of came to me as I was talking, but what I want to do now is I want to focus on, I think there's 2 parts to creative work, okay? There's like day-to-day creativity. There's like projects, like working on like a project. Like you're a photographer, you also are a, what would you call it, cinematographer?
Yeah.
All right, so you'll have a project. So somebody will say, hey, they'll suggest it, or you'll come up with your own project, like a YouTube video, for example. Let's use that for example. And you come up with the idea, you put it together. I see you work on it. Like you work hard on this stuff, and people, you know, they watch it and they say, oh, that's just Vince talking. But you actually have to put it together. You have to put a script together. You go shoot it, you package it, you edit it, and you deliver it. And that's like a process, right? And I want to talk about that in a second. But after that, I want to kind of come back and talk about like the bigger things, the bigger creative, like your main project in life is your life, is how you live your life and how you're communicating your life to other people. And so I want to talk about that. And then I will also talk about, if you want to ask me questions about how to prepare, talks, how to prepare messages, how to get your thoughts. Cause my thoughts are like everywhere in the world. And sometimes you have to just like work really hard to get them
narrowed down,
a focused idea. So anyway, so we're going to start with you. I just want to ask you, like, first of all, what the heck got you into photography? Why did you do that in the first place? Because you have a photography business in Ventura, California, and it's successful. It's doing well. The phone rings off the hook for your business. Now you're like you're not bored with it, I shouldn't say, but now you're like, you want to know what else there is out there too. Like it's a part of what you do, but it's not everything.
Yeah. So we'll start with question number one, right? What kind of got me into it? And I think, first of all, I don't think I've mastered it. I'm bored of it. Maybe like subconsciously I'm bored of it. I don't know.
I don't think you're bored. I shouldn't say that. I think you're ready to take it to the next level. That's probably a better way to say it.
Yeah, I think I'm always trying to do new things, and everyone's just like, you don't need this or you don't need that to be successful. But I feel like the more tools that I have, enables me to try different things. And that's all. You know, if you see me with a new light or a new piece of gear, isn't because I love gear. You would accuse me a lot of loving gear, definitely. But I'm just constantly trying to change what I'm doing, and not so much change, but develop new styles or be creative inside of that photography realm in order that I might find something that I haven't found before. That's it. So it isn't that I'm bored. It's just that I'm just tweaking, just making small tweaks constantly.
Right.
But I think getting into photography, so we filmed a little documentary in Israel in early 2010. Mm-hmm. Was that probably around the time?
I think so, yeah.
And we picked up DSLR cameras. And one of the biggest hurdles, and this is going to sound bad, and this is going against everything that I believe as a creative probably, but one of the biggest hurdles of doing video was probably having a camera that I really was excited about using to create film style projects, right? Because before then we had like these like point and shoot style that shot DV tapes. Like when we started shooting film, it wasn't on SD cards.
No, it was on tapes.
It was
little tiny tapes.
Right. It was literally on DV tapes, right? And you would sit there.
I still have a bunch of them. I don't know what to do with them. I don't even know how to get the footage off of them, honestly.
Just archive them somewhere, right?
Yeah. They used to have like a VHS tape with like an insert for the tiny tape for the little mini DVs that you'd put it in, and then you'd put it in a VHS, and then you would have to digitize it to you'd have to have a VHS player that also had a DVD player and recorder, and then you have to like digitize it to the DVD player. Then you have to take a DVD out and you have to put it in a computer, and then you'd have to digitize it from there. So people don't know this stuff, but you have to digitize it from there onto the computer. Then you'd have it. And you know what's crazy? My in-laws, they totally have one of those. They have a VHS to DVD player. So we can go back and digitize all of our old
let's
tapes.
Just bring it back full-fledged, like tape. We'll bring tape back.
Right. Yeah. Right. There you go. Just like start shooting with tape. It's super high quality. So going back to the photography.
Okay.
And I shouldn't have said that you got, anyway, you're very passionate about photography. What I meant to say earlier was you're not content with just being a photographer, right? Like you're not content with just doing that. You want to add to that I guess arsenal of creative weapons that you have, right?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting creative weapons. Yeah. Yeah, I think what got me into the photography. So we got access. I think the 5D2 was the camera we got to shoot with in Israel, and that was a camera that I hadn't had before. There's a quality of camera that I hadn't had before. And when the 5D2 came out, if you know anything about video and photo, like that camera really revolutionized the industry. A lot of things came from that. A lot of camera companies evolved their cameras around the 5D2. They can't in
changed
5D2.
My world, that's for sure.
Oh, definitely. And so knowing that I could get that kind of quality, cinematic quality, and photo quality out of that camera really gave me, it was a creative tool, again, not just a toy, but it was a creative tool to enable me to tell better stories. And so being able to get that camera in my hands, I knew that I could take that camera and tell better stories with it. And I think that's what really got me into photography, because I was really passionate about video at the time. But at the same time, I knew playing with that camera, and it was a photography camera that shot film, I knew that if I understood the video side of that, I could also tell stories with photographs, and it was something that I really wanted to do.
Right. Yeah. So basically, you're supposed to be shooting the video the whole time, but you just kept sneaking off and shooting photos. But you got some good photos that trip. I remember you had some pretty good like editorial stuff.
I did take a lot of photos, but I did. Yeah, we. I think I was just so. I
you were
think
the original
mesmerized.
crossover photographer, videographer, right? Like now. Like if you hire a photographer, you just expect that they can shoot amazing video too. But like back in the day, right? You were one of the few that was doing both. You were shooting photos and videos. I remember what's funny is I remember when we first started doing that, we started thinking, man, like this HD quality, this 1080p quality is probably good enough to like grab screen captures off of the cameras, so you can have photos from video footage. I remember thinking that, and then
You always said that. I don't know if I definitely believe that.
Right,
you would always
right.
be like, dude, check out this screen capture. And be like, that's not high enough quality.
I think I always just thought that you can do more, you know? You can just do more. I think that's what it is. Like, I don't know. I just, it's like the restlessness, and I think we both have that. But so you started doing that. Then you ended up quitting your job, and you ended up taking like a marketing job. But then somewhere in there, you decided to start Open Iris Photography. How'd that work? I was kind of around, but I don't remember everything from when you started. I kind of joined up with you a little bit later. I don't know what happened when you first started. I know you had hustle.
I was hiding.
Yeah.
Is that what's happening? I was hiding
right.
from me. No, yeah.
You
So I
went and
moved
got
over. So
all your own gear. You got a bunch of gear.
yeah,
You went with the Canons because you knew the Canons.
right.
We both shot like a ton of different camera systems since then. I think now we're like all the way back to Canon. Like it's crazy. Anyway, so how did you start?
So I'll just start with I think process is huge, right? Like you're talking about like
Yeah.
like a creative process. And I think for me, in order to get to a place where I felt comfortable, was developing a foundation. And I think in order to be a creative, you have to have foundation. And it's funny because you mentioned that word obedience, and I think obedience is a huge part of creativity. And that might be something that might, like that might be, no, like people that are obedient aren't necessarily creative. And I don't know if I 100% buy into that, because there are rules to photography. There are rules to cinematography. There are rules to art, and those rules are great, and they're there, and they get you started, right? And you have to be obedient to those rules. And then when you get good enough, if you have a great enough foundation, you can start breaking those rules and doing something a little bit different. So for me, in order to start a business and start something, I knew when I started Open Iris Photography, I knew that I needed to be sure that I had the foundation in place, like that I knew the basics. And for a lot of people, I think they want to get a jump start, like, I'll just grab a camera and get started, and I don't need any kind of training and whatever. But I think having the basics in place, having that foundation in place, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this too. Foundation is development for everything else that you do. And so when I started Open Iris Photography, I wanted to make sure that I knew that what I was talking about. And I started writing a little book, and I think you read part of it, Fake It Until You Make It. And for me, that's just a lot about the hustle. It isn't necessarily that I actually told people that I can do work that I couldn't do. It was just going out and learning skills that I didn't have beforehand.
Well, you've had a habit of, and I don't want to like blow this out of proportion,
No, it's all right.
but you've had a habit of committing to something before you know how to do it. And I love it, because it puts you in a place where you have to figure it out, but you also have been able to figure it out. Like you're like, oh, I can do that. And then you like figure out how to do it, and you do it. And that's like a huge part of learning, right? You learn by doing. It's huge. But going back to the basics, that was before, maybe there were YouTube videos you could find, how to learn how to use a camera or whatever, but it was kind of hard to like find those resources back then. So how'd you even start? You picked up a DSLR, this crazy piece of equipment. Like, how did you even start using it? Like what?
Well, I think, like you said, a lot of it was coming from that. You helped me a lot, honestly, which is funny. Looking back in the photograph, because you went to a class, and you got a lot of those principles down for using a DSLR for videography. And when you came back and said, hey, we're going to use these DSLRs for doing video now, I'm like, what? I remember thinking, like, we're going to use photo cameras for video. Like, I was really perplexed. Like, that doesn't make sense. But I'm with it, and you're like, oh, you have to follow shutter speeds and aperture and all of this stuff, and it's just stuff that you knew about aperture and video, but you really didn't know that shutter speed and white balance and all these different things that went into that.
I learned a lot
DSLR.
of video from a guy named Scott Garcia who helped me a lot, like kind of with the basics. And we also went to that conference together, but we were before the DSLR world. We were shooting with, like you said, like those tape camcorders and those mini DV camcorders, and that was a whole different world. In some ways, it was a lot easier, but you weren't getting the results that probably like I think when before the DSLR kind of revolution with video, these cameras were fun to shoot with, but you weren't getting like Hollywood, so quality footage. You weren't getting this amazing look. And then all of a sudden the 5D Mark II comes out, and you're able to take this point and shoot camera and get amazing quality. And I remember when I first started shooting that camera, I didn't know what I was doing at all. We had a little nifty 50 on there, a little 1.8 50 mil.
Oh yeah, just complete. We thought it was amazing,
Did
but
not know what we were doing. Just handheld, just like shooting stuff. I remember shooting some videos and just thinking, wow, this is amazing. Like now we can full on shoot movies. And so we overcommitted ourselves. Of course, we went out and shot a bunch of stuff, and now we have a company over here, and we're shooting random commercial stuff and whatnot. And so so going back to the process, you learn how to shoot photos, you learn how to shoot some videos, you learn how to do the basics, but then you've got to take it to the next level. Like shooting something is one, I think, part of that process, but then you have to learn how to edit it and deliver it. You need to learn how to take it to the next level, kind of package it, right?
Well, I think again, having a great foundation. I don't want to like keep saying that, but I can't say like how important foundation is, and I don't think no one sees the hours that you put in like into learning photography or videography. If you're it's behind closed doors. A lot of the work that we do as creatives, a lot for marketing stuff, people don't see that work behind the door. If you build a website, if you're doing SEO, if you're editing a photo, they don't see the behind the scenes work. So having that knowledge or having that foundation built, you can't get to the next step. Like you can't, like, you're like, well, everyone's like, oh, how do you get to the next level? How do you break through where clients are calling you and they're booking you for weddings and headshots and things like that? And it's really developing those foundational skills. And then that goes, and it's not just saying, okay, listen, I know shutter, I know ISO, I know aperture, and I know how to click the camera button. It goes far beyond that. I mean, you've seen me in the iterations of pulling out different lighting kits and pulling out, I get to the place and you laugh at me, but it's like I pull out white balance cards and I'm pulling out these different modifiers, and you constantly learn about the most,
technological way to do it. Like,
I don't know if it's technological more than it is just like, hey, I know that if I use this light in this way, or if this light is this far from my subject, or whatever, in photo and video, both work together really a lot the same, that you're going to get these results. And so knowing the results you're going to get by doing different things is huge. So then I know that when I go into a photo shoot, if I, put a light here and I have the sun over here and I put my subject here, like I know exactly what I'm going to get, where I'm not just guessing. I'm not just taking photos because I know how to click a button.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know it's really, really boring. Nobody wants to talk about creativity. Like everyone wants, how do I take the best photo? The better you are at the foundation, the better you're going to be later on down the road.
So you doubled down on the skill set and the technology side of things, right?
Big time.
I remember one of the big things that you really decided that you needed to learn and master was lighting at the beginning. And because a lot of photographers, they'll go out to weddings or they'll go to events and like they don't, like they're just shooting with a camera and no lights, or even like a flash on top of the camera. And I remember like at the very beginning, you're like, that's a no-no. Like don't do that. You learn how to light things well.
Well,
and
I'll say this, and you're going to like this
now
one.
You're like the biggest light nerd I know. It's insane.
Lighting is to photography and videography as the English language is to speaking.
Okay.
I mean, honestly,
Right, it's
like, no, they coincide together. Like you can't be a great communicator without knowing the English language. Like I I get by with communication because I can speak English, but
Right.
the more that I open up my vocabulary, the more that I have an understanding of putting sentences together, and the more that I understand, just what it is,
Right.
the better I can communicate. And that's why a lot of us were like, because we don't have that, that development in our language yet, in our
Right.
skill set. And so if
Right,
I put
right.
more time in developing that, I'm going to be a better communicator, a better speaker. I'm going to be able to put sentences together better. So again, light for me, again, the foundation was important. So understanding lighting, understanding how the camera and the light came into the sensor, all of that nerd stuff that nobody wants to talk about.
Right.
That stuff
It
is
makes
huge
sense.
and
I
going to the
mean,
next
yeah.
level.
It makes sense from a very basic standpoint. That's how light was. That's the one thing you have to take a photograph. That's the one thing you have to get an image, right? Is light. And so it makes sense to start there. What's funny is I've studied a lot of people that are really successful, whether it's business or whether it's art or whatever it is in life, like maybe athletics or whatever. They're very they practice common sense. Like they focus on what just makes sense,
Right.
and they work really hard at mastering those basics. I think you're right. I think you're 100% right. So whatever world you're in, if you're a photographer, you're probably really interested in this episode. If you're not, you're probably losing interest, and I'm sorry for that. But there's an application to everyone, because whatever world you're in, you need to find out what the most important parts of that world
For sure.
is. Like you need to find out what the basics really are. You need to double down on those things. Like get deep. Like figure it out. Like go deeper than anybody else has gone in that area, in the things that are most obvious. I think sometimes, like when you think of creativity, you think I have to think beyond the realm of what everyone else has thought. I have to really have this mastermind. But really, I think you're right in a lot of ways. You have to just think about what really matters, right? Focus on that, and then you can grow to levels that you probably didn't even imagine.
Again, and the obedience thing for me is huge, because I think it does come into play, and
That's
it's
interesting.
weird because the fact that I didn't know, you didn't tell me about this obedience
Right.
versus creativity thing before we went into this thing, so I think my mind's still warping around
Yeah,
that.
this is all unscripted. That's
Right.
for
So
sure.
I think it's cool because it's weird that obedience has dropped off so hard. That's a cool graph. That's a great tool that you have to link that in the show notes for people.
Yeah.
And that creativity has a huge upward, but I think in order to have a creative outlet, and I'm not saying that there are a lot of people that all of a sudden pick up a guitar and they're just musically talented, I guess, from the get-go. They don't have to know the basics, or they don't care to know. That's a rare, probably,
Right.
that's not the case usually.
So that's all one faucet of creativity. That's kind of more like the business side. That's more like the get stuff done side of creativity, which is a huge part of creativity, because if you're never getting anything done and you're never sharing it with the world, how creative are you? It goes back to that whole...
Do you think that's the business side though? Like, do you think that's just like one, I mean, obviously it's an aspect, but don't you think, like, honestly, a foundation for creativity, if you can say foundation for creativity, is knowing some basics. Like if you can't put things together, if you
Right.
can't, like I told you the other day, like for me, creativity is connecting the dots. It's like, if there's a bunch of dots on a piece of paper, like how would you connect those dots?
Okay,
and
so
it's
I'll
a
correct,
map, right?
I'll correct myself. You're right. It's not just about business. It's also about inspiring the world. I went to a museum in Washington, D.C. with my wife a couple years ago, and it was called the News Museum. All right, it's like the Newseum or something like that. They have some catchy name for it. I can't remember the exact, but I'll put it in the show notes. And when we walked through that museum, it's just full of pictures that were taken, editorial pictures that made it into newspapers or other media outlets, and that really changed the world. And there's some photography. There's an area that you can go in, and there's like this photography that is like just really like really altered history. Really, like it's like in like war photos, and one of the photos I can remember is the photo of a child who's sick and not is malnourished, and the child is like kneeling down, and there's like a vulture in the background. I don't know if you've seen this photo, but really interesting photo, and I can't remember any of the names of them right now, but just mind-blowing photography. And one of the thoughts I had was there's two aspects to taking one of these photos that changes the world. One is you got to know the basics. You got to know how to use your stinking camera, right? You have to have the technology down. The other aspect is you just have to be there. You have to be there, right? Like you're not taking that photo if you're not there.
Right.
You're not committing to, being wherever it is that you need to be. And I think was Chase Jarvis, didn't he say that there's a good photo, like there's like 15 good photos from any angle that you're standing in at any time or something like that. So I do think that it's about keeping your eyes open where you are too, right? But a lot of it has to do with commitment. It has to do with the fact that, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to commit to it. A lot of people won't ever commit. They'll have dreams and ideas and thoughts, and they'll think, what if, their whole life, but they'll never fully commit and say, hey, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, you definitely got to put the blinders on, I think, when you're starting. And it's interesting. We talked about this last episode, and I would say go back and listen to that last episode as well, because I think, like you said, it ties a lot together.
Right.
But yeah, definitely. I think as you're putting yourself out there as any kind of creative, if you're sharing a photograph, you got to put those blinders on and keep sharing and keep sharing and keep sharing until something hits, or even if it doesn't hit, keep doing it until you commit to it, until you feel comfortable in your skill set. And I think that's huge. But going back, because I love what you said about being in that museum and being in that place and seeing that photograph, and that photograph definitely probably spoke to you, right? Like it stuck off the wall. And I think a lot of that, after you have foundation, I think is knowing your subject and telling your story. And again, to really stand out, I think a lot of people miss this step, and you're huge on this, and I love it. And it's really pushed me to develop this side of my career, I guess you would say, or my path into creativity would be telling better stories. And I think that goes even with photo as it does with video, as it does with drawing, or, whatever you're doing, having a story or knowing your subject, I would even say is a better way to phrase it. Knowing the thing that you're doing is really, really important, because I think a lot of times we just have that camera, or we just have that thing that we're doing, and we just go out and we shoot randomly, or, that we start painting and we really don't know what we're doing. We don't really have an end game. And sometimes that can be good. That's a great time for practice and drawing inspiration. But I think the more you know your story and the more you know your subject and exactly what you're supposed to be getting, the better your results are going to be going into those things.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. But going back to this idea of the fear that some people have before they start a new venture or a new skill or whatever it is, whether it's artistically or even in business or in life, there's this like feeling that you get from the inside, I think, out. It's an insecurity. There's a probably conglomerate of emotions that you feel before you start something new. But a lot of us have that voice inside of us that says you can't do this, or you shouldn't do this, or why are you doing this? And, there's so many other people that are doing it. And why would you, feel like you're great enough to jump into that scene in that world and really like influence others. And I to those of you guys that have that voice, just know that like everybody that has ever done anything great has had that voice. But the people that do great things are people that have learned to silence that voice, or use it, right? Or use it to their advantage and say, yeah, I am afraid of that. Why am I afraid of that? Right? Like, or I am like nervous about like, why? What's the reason? Usually it's the things that you're most afraid of that are like your fear is usually pushing you towards the things that are the greatest things in your life. I do believe that.
Okay.
And I do. I think
that's interesting,
because you wouldn't be afraid of it if you weren't being pushed internally to commit to that thing, right? Like it's, I don't know. It's kind of a weird thought, but
I definitely know what you're saying. Honestly, every day, I think the voice speaks to me. Every day.
Right.
Honestly, I wake up every day and I'm like, man, like
what are you doing?
What? No, not so much. What am I doing? I think it's not so much. Even with anything, I think you wake up as a creative and as anybody that's building and go, I want to do it better today.
Right.
And so I'm constantly challenging even the stuff that I've done. Like I don't want the work that I did yesterday. I don't want the work I did 10 hours ago to dictate or even stop me from doing better work, in the future. And so I'm constantly wanting to develop and get better. And so when I wake up, I look at the stuff I did yesterday and go, man, I don't know if that was good enough. And you have a choice. You can either let it stifle you and stunt you and stop you right in your tracks and go, forget it. I'm not going to do this. Or like you said, you use it.
Right.
And I think using it is overcoming fear. And I'm constantly using it. And I think a lot of the voices come internally, like in your own head. Like you got to get out of your own head sometimes.
Yeah.
And then it also comes externally where like we said last episode, like haters are going to hate. Like people are going to say like, you're not that good. I remember when I started photography, I had a couple people tell me like, why are you even doing this? Like, you're not that good, or, you never commit to anything or whatever. You always hear people say these different things and you just say, okay, sure. And I let that stuff feed me instead of stifle me. I get excited and I don't know, maybe it's, if Nick was here, he'd tell us it's psychological, but I want to prove people wrong. Like you said, I have maybe I still have it. But I overcommit. Maybe I'll say like, hey, I can pull this off, and maybe you haven't seen it in my skill set, but in my mind, I have so much foundation.
I don't see you doing that as much now.
Well,
I saw it when you first started.
But I think it goes down to
I think it comes yourself.
No. I think it's good because I think it comes down to foundation. Like I believe so much in my foundation and the base of what I was learning that all I was doing was laying a brick upon my foundation and saying like, hey, like if I can do this, then that also is in the same, in the same building as this. And so it wasn't that I felt like I was jumping out of the building saying like, I was doing something completely new. It was just knowing the skill sets that I had and knowing that if these things line up, I can pull that off. And so again, inner voice, use it. And if not, silence it. And then external voices, just smile. I think that's the best thing you can do is smile and just say, okay.
It's funny because no matter how big you get, it seems like I've seen famous people talk about the same stuff as, just regular folks like us, like talk about the same issues. Like they can't handle YouTube comments or they can't handle social media comments or whatever. And it just shows that voice is inside of all of us. There's a voice in there saying you can't or you shouldn't or why. And you just have to learn to move past it. There's a book that I recommend if you guys are readers. I'm a reader. It's actually a pretty short read. It's called The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. And Steven Pressfield's a writer. And so he talks about this thing called the resistance. And this is the term he uses for that force that's kind of telling us that we can't do it. But I'm just going to read you a couple quotes real quick from that book. It says, most of us have two lives, the life we live and the unlived life within us. Between the two stands resistance. He says, late at night, have you experienced a vision of the person you might become, the work you could accomplish, the realized being you were meant to be? Are you a writer who doesn't write, a painter who doesn't paint, an entrepreneur who never starts a venture? Then you know what resistance is. Resistance seems to come from outside ourselves. We locate it in spouses, jobs, bosses, kids, peripheral opponents, as Pat Riley used to say when he coached the Los Angeles Lakers. Resistance is not a peripheral opponent. Resistance arises from within. It is a self-generated and self-perpetuated resistance is the enemy within. And he's so right about that. Like we assume that everyone's against us all the time, especially the more like creative you are, the more like emotionally connected maybe you are. I don't know. That's a thought I have, but I feel like if you're emotionally connected with the way, like you're intuitive with how other people feel, like you also kind of like project that, probably in a weird way sometimes. You have the ability to assume probably too much that people are thinking, right? Like maybe somebody doesn't care about your art, or they don't care about your podcast, or they don't care about your film or whatever. That might be true, 100% true. But you will take that idea that they don't care because you're telling them about it, whatever. They're like, yeah, whatever, that's cool. You might take that thought that they don't care, and you might project a whole backstory to it and think like, oh, well, they don't care because they think I'm, stupid, or they think that I am goofy, or they think that, I'm this or that, whatever it is. I think we can just project these stories that are so big and so negative. But I think at the same time, if you learn how to harness that, you can project a story that is compelling to people. And ultimately, that's what creativity, I think, is. It's storytelling. It's being able to use your life to communicate something to other people. And hopefully, you're communicating something that is improving their life, that is giving them hope, that's giving them like an excitement about the future, about the world we live in, about God, about society, about culture, about the relationships we have. I don't know. It kind of went a little deep on that, but there is that thought inside of us. It's like, no, you can't, but you just have to fight it. You have to fight against it. So moving on. Let's, so if you feel like you can't do it, just welcome to the club, right? Like,
yeah. I think you made really good. I think it's really, I love that book. I haven't read that book, so I have to go check that out.
You haven't read The War of Art?
No,
Dude.
No, I am the War of Art.
You are the War.
It's my self-confidence level.
Okay,
but that's another part of it, right? Having a little bit of self-confidence too, like being able to.
I think like,
I think people sometimes think that people that do are a little bit full of themselves. Like,
yeah,
when
they do. People think that, but I don't think that. And people say that I'm full of myself or like cocky or something. Dude, I am like not like that at all. I don't think. Like,
you're a cocky.
Am I? I don't know. I feel like I wake up with this feeling that there's more every day than what I see, and it bothers me, and I feel like if I don't do something about it, that I'm gonna be in a dark pit.
No, I think bothers.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
I feel like if I'm not aggressively in the fight every day, like doing something to create or like to think, like I do a lot of thinking about creating. I probably less creating than I should, but if I'm not actively engaged in that game, I feel like I'm like lost. I really do.
I like that you said bothered though, because I think that's what I was trying to say, that I wake up bothered every day. Like when I look at my photographs, I'm bothered because I want them to be better. When I look at my videos, I'm bothered because I think I'm leaving a lot on the table.
So in the deeper scheme of like creativity, that's one of the things I was thinking of. Like the first thing that that you can use as a tool in the world of creative art, creative work, is to think negatively. Like people say you shouldn't think negatively, but sometimes we just do automatically. Obviously, humans think negatively. You know why? You know what the proof is for that? Watch the news.
Right. Yeah.
Watch the news.
And
the
the
news
ratings.
catches our attention because it's negative. We automatically think negatively, and for some of it's hard to get out of that space. But what you don't understand about thinking negatively is it's a tool. Also, it's also a way to notice. There's 3 things I wrote down. Okay, 3 things. This is like a starting point for like a bigger creative project. Okay, these are the 3 things that you could ask yourself in the world of like thinking negatively. First, what's missing?
Okay.
Like think about what's missing. Second, what's broken, and third, what's dead. So like if you want to create something, think about those 3. That's a good place to start. What's missing, what's broken, what's dead. Because if something is missing, then guess what? You have a job to go find what's missing. If something's broken, then guess what? You have a job to go fix it. If something's dead, guess what? You have a job to go revive it, to restore it, to bring it back to life, right? And all of a sudden, you're engaged in creative work. Like if you're just the happiest person in the world and you always think everything's great, you're probably not going to be very creative.
That's interesting that you bring, because I think that's more of a wiring mechanism and more than it is like a truth
you don't
about
think like
creativity.
That? Or is it?
No, I definitely have. I mean, you live in the same office as me, so you
Right.
know that negativity creeps into me. But when I'm able to get away from the negativity and like
Right.
the voices and all the stuff.
So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that you need to be negative all the time.
No, right.
What I'm saying is when you do think negatively, use it as a tool to find a problem. Then you got to switch gears into how can I fix that problem? And that's a very positive mindset. Does that make sense?
No,
this is kind of like a weird thought process.
We're
going to
go on a loop right now. No,
and
it's
I know
okay.
that I'm like thinking of it as I'm going, but like I really do feel like I sometimes I feel bad because I do think negatively a lot. And over the years, I've seen it. I've observed it with people that are really close to me that we know. Like they think negatively a lot, but they use that to find a solution. And that creates something amazing. It's like if you were never able to see a problem, you would never be able to fix the problem.
I
right?
understand, and I believe like in creative problem solving and like being able to fix problems and things like that. But again,
Right.
I think like you said, it's interesting you brought up the news, because I think it is a wiring thing. Like, and what I mean by that is we're wired we're wired in a way that we want conflict and then we want resolution. That's what the news is. That's what every movie is. Go pick up every movie in the movie store. At some point in the narrative, there's going to be a conflict, and then in that conflict, there's a resolution. And then really movies that we hate, they usually don't have a resolution. They leave us hanging. We're like, that's a horrible movie. Why did it end like that? You know, why didn't the guy get back with the girl? Or why didn't, you know, it bothers us. Like we cannot stand not to have resolution.
Right.
And so I think deep down in just society and culture, like we're wired to in story in our daily lives that there's going to be conflict, and in that conflict there's going to be resolution. And I think that sometimes can be counterintuitive to being creative, because, and hang with me for a second, because I think if we get caught up in that cycle where we're just like conflict resolution, and again, that's any person that creates films will tell you, in order to have a good story, you got to have a conflict and you got to have a resolution. Am I right?
If you're creating like Rocky, it's conflict. You almost die, and then resolution.
But it's still at the end of the story. It's
Rocky wins, man.
It's the same thing. And if he doesn't win, you are upset. You're just like, I mean, even at the end of Rocky 1, you're just like, there better be a Rocky 2, otherwise it's not. You know, this ain't gonna be cool. But I think flipping the switch a little bit, if we're able to get to a place that I think some of my favorite movies when they don't have resolution, where they leave you hanging and it lets you think for yourself. Right, because creativity, I wish Jeremy can pipe into this, because I know Jeremy's mind is spinning right now, but he can just start yelling from the thing. But I think sometimes when we can just leave a story alone and say, okay, like not have to have the resolution necessarily, and let it be open-ended, where it creates new thought and new emotions and evokes new thinking.
But you're assuming though that a lot of people are like you're the type of guy that, like, you're watching basketball earlier. In fact, you're missing your favorite team of all time.
Because I really believe in this podcast.
Because you believe in this podcast. Yeah. I appreciate that. But you're watching basketball, and you're the type of guy that wants to, like, at some point reach into the screen and like grab the ball and like start playing with them. And most people aren't like that. Like most people, we've become a consumer society. Most people still consume. Very few people create.
Right.
Very few people do what we're doing right now. And it's not like we're like solving like world crisis, or not like we're building rockets right now. This isn't like crazy stuff. We're just doing something to be a creator rather than just a consumer. But most people just consume. That's all they ever do. They're used to just sitting back, and so they want the problem to be solved for them. You are a creator. You're somebody that's like, okay, yeah, I see the problem. I want to be in the game with you. I want to. So like, if a movie doesn't have a resolve, you're like, okay, good. I can take that and move on with it and think about my own conclusion, right? I can think about my own. And you like that. You appreciate that. But you're a very rare bird in that world, I think. Like
I think it more comes down to, again, like that we change the way that we're wired, that we don't have, everything doesn't have to have resolution. That
plus
sounds
you just
really,
like stuff that's different.
No, I think honestly, it isn't just me being hipster or whatever, or being, just saying, oh no, it's not me just bucking the status quo. It's me saying, again, going back to what we talked about in the beginning. I hate that I go full circle and stuff, but I really want to bring this in. Going back to photography, at the end of the day, you press a button, you press the shutter button, it goes click, you take a photo, it's done. Conflict, resolute, whatever, it's there. You get a result. I think if you're able to think beyond just the shutter button, if you're able to think just beyond the rules, that's again, if you're able to think beyond the foundation, then that's where you're able to open up to, a new level of creativity and honestly stand out from the crowd and what you're doing. And maybe you don't want to stand out from the crowd, and that's okay. And in my line of work, I do want to stand out a little bit, and that sounds weird to say, but I do want people to see my work and appreciate it. Like you said, I want somebody to see my photo in a museum and go like, wow, that really did something to me. But I don't think you're able to get into a space creatively. And again, everyone's different. I am thinking for myself right now, but everyone's different. If you get stuck in the revolving conflict resolution, you have to get to a place where maybe it's just a lot of conflict for a long time. Like you said, it's the Rocky story. And maybe you're figuring stuff out for a long time. And in that, you find some resolution that no one's ever found before. But it's really, and again, I know it's the same story, but we're so fast to want to solve problems today. Like we just like, okay, yeah, this is it, done. And
so, do you think that if somebody is very creative and very talented and creates amazing work. Let's say photography, for example.
Okay.
They go out, they shoot the most amazing photos, but nobody like loves it. Do you think they could still have talent, or do you think that they don't?
Oh, I think the most talented people in the world probably don't even share their photographs. I'm sure that, like I said in the last episode, like there's probably the best filmmaker, the best photographer, the best chef.
So to you, just curious, what makes somebody good at what they do?
I think standing out would be number one, which would be counter what I just said. But I think being able to stand out. But number two, the foundation and self-confidence, like knowing that they know what they do is really, really good. And
I'm into process. Like if I see work, sometimes I'll see work and I know the work it took to make that work. Like I know how hard it was and the process behind it. And that like blows me away. Like it blows me away to think of somebody like going to great odds. Like in the News Museum in DC, there's another photograph where a man is being shot in the street, and it's brutal. It's like it's horrifying, but it's also amazing that photographer, like to me, it tells a story of a photographer who was willing to stand in harm's way to take an image of war where real bullets are flying. Like the guns were like pointed toward him in this photograph. And that photographer stood his ground in a war zone and snapped that shutter, even though he could have been killed. And he did that so that people could see the horrific images of actual wars, like an innocent man being shot. A lot of people look at that and just go, oh, I need to look away. Like that's sad. And it was sad, very sad. But the fact that photographer traveled to that part of the world, probably got in a Jeep with some soldiers, and he was unarmed, and he rode in that Jeep through the jungle for hours and hours and hours, and had to camp and had to keep his gear good, and had to probably talk his way into that situation. And then when the bullets started flying, he like stood up and he walked right into the fight, and he took that image. Like I see that image and I'm like, dude, like that's the work that inspires me. Like to be able to just walk straight into a war zone and do what you have to do. Like that blows my mind. That's the type of person. Huh?
That's sacrifice though, right?
Yeah, but
it's a lot of sacrifice, but you appreciate.
Yeah, maybe they are a little crazy. Maybe they are a little nuts. Maybe they don't have families.
I think creative people are nuts a little bit, but no, I think what you're talking about too is a lot of sacrifice, like the time that it takes, like in order to develop these skills, foundation, learning your tools, learning your craft, being creative takes a lot of sacrifice.
But then having the guts to freaking do it, right? Just to do it and not care what anybody thinks. Here's the deal. There's no reason, okay, to care about what other people think, as long as you believe in what you're doing. If you don't believe in what you're doing, then, you know, you might need to question what you're doing. But if you believe in your heart that this is why God put you on this earth, then do it with everything you've got. Don't question it. Don't wait for permission. Do it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I believe that.
Yeah, and I think you, like I said, going one step further, it's a sacrifice thing. Like do that thing and be willing to make the sacrifices that it takes to get to that place where you want to be. Or like you said, if you believe that God put you on this earth for that reason, sacrifice, whatever that you need to sacrifice in order to get to that place where you are successful in your own right, where you feel like you've accomplished your goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
It does. No, it does. It really does. So to bring this back, we got to end here because we're running out of time. But creative process. What's one thing you can leave everybody with the creative process?
I can give. Let me just
starting out.
I'll just give them a list. Is that a list okay?
Yeah,
is that too uncreative to give a list?
No, I think it's good.
So I wrote down, so just going into things, I actually wrote some stuff down. I just said foundation is huge. So we talked about that. Mm-hmm. Storytelling, subject, know your story, know your subject, and get into the details of that. Mm-hmm. Execution. And I think that's a lot, like you said, a lot of times we're excited about something, but we never execute. And I think as a creative, you got to execute a lot more than you have ideas.
Right.
And if you can get to the stage of execution, then you're going to have a lot more practice in theory, correct? Like we see a lot of people just talk, but not really do stuff.
Right.
The other thing I would say is development. Like, and what I mean is just like being able to take that story and develop. And I think that goes with cooling, like taking your best work and then using that to create something amazing. And I think once you have a foundation, once you know your story, once you execute, you'll know what good work looks like. And one of the things I think that's really awesome about what you do, and I'm not trying to build you up right now because I don't want to do that. I like tearing you down because, like I said, you're cocky. You're not really. I'm just kidding. But is being able to identify really, really good work. Like that's huge. And so I think the more that you're able to create, the more you're going to understand what good work actually looks like. Mm-hmm. And knowing what went into it, right? The sacrifice, what we just talked about.
Right.
And then sharing. And some people don't ever get to this place. And not all creative things are meant to be shared. It could be for your own, thing. But I think being able
You've helped me with that. You share everything. You go for it. I love it.
Right.
I'm the type of person that wants it to be really perfect before I put it out there because I have insecurities. That's why. And in my work sometimes. And I don't want to be like that. I want to be somebody who just says, go for it.
For sure. So foundation, story, execution, development, and share. Yep. So that's my list for you guys.
Sounds good. So if you guys are out there and you need some emotional support, we're just two goofballs, two knuckleheads that are just committing to creative work in life. And we hope and pray that you are able to take this conversation and add to it and talk to your peeps, to your people around you that are living life with you, and encourage them to do what they need to do. So take this, spread it, and use it. And thank you so much for listening to this episode. We'll be back next week. We'll see you guys later.